Alrighty, everybody, here we go for another round of Astro-Babble. Happy Sunday. Um, and let's talk a little bit about what we're doing. So I have eight charts that everybody has donated ever so lovingly. Hey, Mary Hun, how you doing? Going live on Instagram and Facebook with these charts, doing about 8 charts a day. If you would like yours submitted, feel free to private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time, and we will add you to the queue. Happy Sunday, everyone. And we will, yeah, keep this going. I've got a couple days worth of charts left, so there's plenty of room. And I will private message you when your chart is up in the queue. I am doing these cold, so I enter the birth times into my software, and then we basically just see what we see. This is my version of sharing astrology with you, just kind of astro babbling at your face. So this is how we're going to do it. A little bit of fizzy water, and shall we begin? Okay, we're starting with Christina. Christina this morning was born at 3:20 p.m. in Toronto. Let's take a peek at Christina's chart, and she is lovely. Why is she lovely? Because she has Scorpio ascendant. She doesn't just have Scorpio ascendant, she also has Pluto and the moon on her Scorpio ascendant. So let's talk a little bit about my favorite topic, which are my placements. And in astrology, that's really where we get to have some fun. Is you know certain placements when you see them in a chart because you have them in yours, and you get to really unpack them for other people. And I think that that's one of the glories of being an astrologer. So having Scorpio on the ascendant, Christina, is a really interesting dynamic, especially having Pluto and the moon in Scorpio on your ascendant. I think that there are a couple Scorpio themes that you need to be aware of. One, we have access to unbridled personal power. The issue with our life is that we need to learn how to use that power responsibly instead of giving somebody that up and down look that we can do so well, deciding that we hate them, and then choosing whether or not to ruin their life, as Scorpios can, because we get to the bottom of stuff. We get to see people's secrets. We know whether or not they're a good or bad person right off the bat, whether or not they're dangerous. We have that intuitive skill, which makes us one of the feared signs of the zodiac when we have that Scorpio ascendant taking hold. The personality, because the moon is in Scorpio, is slightly hidden. It's slightly reclusive. It's slightly emotionally vulnerable, hypersensitive as well. And it's not something you're really going to be able to fully master until that Pluto ripens around age 50. So there's a lot of personal dynamics that I think are really interesting in your chart, that being the first one that we come to. The second interesting personal dynamic, as if having Pluto and the moon in Scorpio right on that Scorpio ascendant isn't complicated enough, we also have a sign-based square from the sun in Leo in the 10th. Get that, my astrologers. We also have Mercury in Leo here, which is retrograde, as well as Venus in Leo here up in the 10th as well, all making a sign-based square to the personality. Despite your natural inclinations, Christina, of wanting to withdraw, of wanting to hold back, of wanting to kind of lurk in the shadows and observe, as opposed to being out in the spotlight, there is this Leo side of you that does crave attention, that does crave the drama of it all. And often, if you do get overstimulated emotionally, one of your defaults will be to make a big stink about it, to throw a big party, or to really engage in that dramatic flair that you have as part of your sun in Leo in the 10th. Yeah, there's lots of really interesting stuff that we could unpack there. But the fact that it's directly conflicting with your moon placement and your ascendant, the ego wants to do things, but the personality might not necessarily agree. You might not necessarily be emotionally ready for it. So make sure that when you get those two fighting impulses, when you have a nice chat with those two wolves inside of your personality, the one that wants to hide via the Scorpio tendencies and the one that wants to be really out in front of people with the solar tendencies, that you understand that both of those need to be nourished. We need to activate the feminine and the masculine principles of that personal dynamic, that the sun needs to be out, it needs to be about, it needs to be socializing, it needs to be seen, it needs to be recognized and appreciated for the center of your personal universe that it is. But then we also have this really important part of you that's kind of tattooed on your soul, which is that Pluto moon ascendant all in Scorpio, that does require darkness, that does require withdrawal, that does require meditation, reflection, respecting your hypersensitivity and not getting overstimulated. So there's lots of good things. Quick question: Libra 12th house, very good at manipulating others, not necessarily a bad thing. I disagree with that. I think that the Scorpio side is really the manipulative side. We're able to manipulate because we know everybody's internal tinkerings, and we have the ability to do that. Libra is not necessarily manipulative. They just want to make sure that everybody's playing a fair game, and they might move the pieces on the board in order to do that. I wouldn't call that manipulative. I'd call that strategic. Okay, what else do we have? We have Saturn and Aquarius retrograde in the fourth, which is ruling the third. Parents, because fourth house is house of family, wouldn't surprise me if parents had writing, teaching, speaking backgrounds, because the fourth is connected to the third. One of the things that I do like to bring up when somebody has Saturn connected to the fourth house is that love, especially because Saturn is here in Aquarius and is retrograde. I think that there's a piece of Christina that's unable to receive love from family members, and this is something that I know I struggle with because Saturn is ruling my fourth house as well, and Saturn is in my third house of communication and siblings. But feeling automatically distanced, that says nothing about the parental upbringing, that says nothing about whether or not the love was available. But especially we see this very, very commonly with people with heavy Scorpio placements, is regardless of the love that was on the table, the love was not able to be received by the parents because for some reason there was this distance that was there that Saturn tends to bring. There might be a fair or unfair harshness in the family dynamic that's not necessarily ideal, but it is correct for the upbringing of Christina. One of the things that I really enjoy seeing about your chart, Christina, is you've got this Saturn in Aquarius retrograde, which indicates that family distance, but you use that as a pole vault with your sun in Leo in the 10th opposing that Saturn to really make sure that you receive your attention from outside sources, that you don't fully withdraw. There is a counterbalance to that process. Even if the people in your immediate family dynamic or those you treat as family, you might not necessarily relate to them, but you can quickly find substitutes in terms of friends and your chosen tribe as opposed to family, which might not get you. That doesn't mean that you need to isolate or that it's fair to isolate them. But if you truly feel like they don't understand you or that there is a distance that can't be bridged, you have a very easy way in your chart to let that Leo sun shine through, which will naturally attract friends and tribe members that you'll be able to nourish that connection with that might not be present from a family dynamic, because the fourth house is ruled by that Saturn and Aquarius retrograde, a very restrictive, holier than thou placement, because Aquarius tends to be overly scientific, overly involved in its work, not necessarily the most lovey, touchy-feely sign to have ruling the fourth house. And I speak from personal experience with that. But again, that's your perspective of what's happening, not what's actually happening. And we need to clarify that. Hey, everybody jumping on. Thank you. Love you. Everybody sending messages already. If you would like to send in your birth date, place, time, feel free to private message me. I do need that exact birth time. And for my people overseas, make sure that you're spelling out the month and the day so that I'm not getting the month and the day confused. If it's like July 6th or June 7th, I don't know if you just put 6-7. I need you to spell it out for me just a little bit because I'm an American. Kill me. Let's go ahead and look at our second chart. And we've got Faye's chart. Faye was born at 10:21 a.m. in, I'm gonna butcher this, hon. You were born in Iowa, but I can't say the name of that city. I can't pronounce it off the top of my head anyway. Libra stellium. That's fun. Libra stellium in the 12th. I just read for one of those yesterday. That's always a super fun combination. We do have a Scorpio ascendant ruled by Mars and Libra. Actually, such a similar chart, honey. That's so interesting. Yeah, so I'm basically going to regurgitate everything that we that I talked about in the previous session yesterday. When we have a stellium in Libra, and this is actually really interesting because the idea of a Libra 12th house already got brought up on Instagram in the live feed because of that Scorpio ascendant. Props, first and foremost, props to all my Scorpio ascendants. We get it, we understand, we know. However, we can often not say, feel, or think in accordance with other people. So I hear you. I hear you, my brethren. But specifically because the Lord of the chart is in the 12th house, whenever we see the 12th house connected with the ascendant, or the sun in the 12th house as well, you have both, Faye, we have self-confidence as a major issue. Because the 12th house is the house of hidden enemies. It represents the Lord of the chart and the sun of the chart being one's own worst enemy. So that's a really tricky placement to get over. We just need to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people, places, things that are supportive to you, supportive to your process, and that you don't get in your own head about what you can or cannot do. Totally agree. Scorpio ascendants, very powerful people. Rock on. I'm biased though. So back to Faye's chart, when we look at all of the planets that she's got stacked up, we've got the sun here, we've got Pluto here, we've got the moon here, we've got Mars and Venus here, all in Libra, in that 12th house of hidden enemies, hospitalizations, and karmic healing would be a good way to summarize that 12th house in 3 words. A grandiose sense of justice and what is fair is really what this stellium speaks towards in the 12th house. Specifically, when we look at all of this Libra energy coming forward in the 12th, it's a social justice warrior complex that really is addicted to almost finding fairness in all unfair situations. The idea of this whole stellium and Libra giving that sense of balance an overly important role in your life. You can't just sit by and watch people be harmed, especially when the odds are stacked against them. And it's your job to kind of, like I said before, manipulate the chess pieces on the board so that you can have people playing at the same level, and instituting handicaps that are really important, but also empowering those who can't speak up for themselves. Because we've got Saturn in the 10th house being ruled by the sun in Leo, law enforcement is actually something that I would suggest. Law enforcement, counseling those who have been wronged, social justice warrior, working in and around the justice system is just a very important part of your personal dynamic. I think that the more you embrace that, the easier your life will be, instead of trying to suppress it or try to take on the system yourself. It's about learning to work with that system and to understand that you don't need to be this masked vigilante running about the city, although I guarantee that you've thought about it, especially because us Scorpio risings love to wear a mask. But just the idea that we as people need to be working with other people, preferably people in higher places who can actually get the stuff done that we want to accomplish. You might not have access to the power that you'd like, Faye, because all that stuff is in the 12th house of hidden enemies, where you might feel like the odds are stacked against you. But one of the big things that this placement does do very well is work with others in positions of power, because you're tapped into the victim mentality and you see that in other people so readily. The people in power actually need you to bridge the gap between them and the people that they're going to help. So you're uniquely qualified to step into these situations with all of this paperwork and basically say, look, this is what's happening in this person's life. This is why it's not fair. Do something about it. And I think that any role that really exemplifies that skill set and that personal driving conviction that you have is going to be really, really important. Yeah, so that's super fun. Let's look at, that's pretty much it. She's stacked so many planets in her 12th chart. We do have Mercury in Virgo, which is the sign of its exaltation. It is retrograde in the 11th house of friendships, though. So friends are a little bit tricky, this is the interesting thing about astrology, is when we have a planet and a sign in a house, it is both what is happening and what could happen. So the idea that the friends that Faye chooses are of that mercurial nature. They tend to be in and out. They tend to be rather flighty. They tend to be very communicative in certain parts, but then there's that retrograde component where the communication that they give and receive might be unpredictable, toxic, or they might actually, interestingly enough, tell Faye the same story like 20 different times. But because we have Mercury in Virgo in the 11th, that's the type of friends that will be attracted to her naturally, and her circle and her tribe, but also the idea that if she wants to look to her friendship house for any sort of remediation, I think that recognizing that they're great communicators, they might not necessarily be great listeners, though, because Mercury in Virgo loves to tell people what to do, not necessarily receive what should be done by themselves. Jupiter in Gemini, retrograde in the 8th, being ruled by that Mercury in Virgo retrograde in the 11th. Whenever we see the house of friendship connected to the house of death, there is especially when the ruler of that house is in that space, there is a connection with friends passing at an early age, because Jupiter is in the 8th house of death, but also accounting, taxes, other people's money, being ruled by the 11th. Wouldn't surprise me if friends tried to rope you into pyramid schemes, multi-level marketing, or you have friends that are specifically able to offer you job opportunities, or you work for them in a way that gives you a little bit of extra cash on the side, because Jupiter is also ruling that second house of finance. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I see in Faye's chart, because we have so much stacked in that 12th house in Libra, and we have the Scorpio ascendant. That's pretty much it. We do have Uranus in Scorpio on the 1st, which makes personality a little bit unpredictable. We do need to watch that and make sure that we channel those personal energies constructively into fighting for others, and that sense of justice, as opposed to being that crippling sense of withdrawal, which tends to fracture the personality in a Scorpio ascendant paired with Uranus. That's a toxic combo, but can be easily remediated by throwing oneself into work. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it. Getting messages, trying to filter through all of them. Why is Scorpio so present in almost every reading? Everybody's different. Scorpio on the ascendant for here, it's just the charts that we're stacked with. We've gotten 2 Scorpio risings for the first 2 charts. Also, my business, my practice is Scorpio rising, because that's what I have. It's who I tend to attract. So that's kind of, but it's the flavor of the day. I remember the first video, it was hilarious because we kept having the Lord of the chart oppose the ascendant, or the ascendant being opposed by everything in the 7th house. And the theme was over-identification with relationships. So every live stream we do has an interesting theme that I think pops up that everybody watching obviously needs to hear. Scorpio energy. So that's kind of part of what we're talking about is everybody's chart is unique, but there are themes that we can all resonate to and relate with if we just give it a chance. Synchronicity, exactly, totally. Okay, let's go to Aaron. Born at 1:17 p.m. in Flint, a Cancer ascendant. Lovely. With the North Node here, ruled by the 8th house in Aquarius in the 8th. Ooh, that's some mediumship. That's some mediumship qualities. Aquarius is really telepathic by nature. Telepathic because it's the air sign. It deals with that mental realm. It's that idea. It's that Prometheus energy of Aquarius that's just able to tap into that collective consciousness. Not excluding randomness like aliens and conspiracy theories, but like all of collective consciousness, and pull through ideas that very few people can tap into without those Aquarius placements. And because we have that in the 8th house of death, there's specific mediumship qualities here. But the idea that the Lord of the chart, the Lord of the ascendant, is in that 8th house of death, taxes, accounting, other people's money, entrepreneurship, business. That 8th house moon really speaks towards serving people with the gift of mediumship, I would say. Venus is here in Aquarius as well. There's a kindness, there's a sweetness, that's involved whenever Venus is in a particular house. And because of that, I think that maybe even love life might be one of the interesting things that is picked up on psychically from Erin. I'm flashing back to Kiki's delivery service when she first meets when she meets the other witch who's coming back from her year apprenticeship, and she says, "I tell fortunes about love." That's what I see with Venus and Aquarius in the eighth all the time. It's just a fun mental image that I see. So that's a fun ascendant to have, an ascendant ruler in the eighth. Let's look at what else we see in the chart. So we've got the two malefics and Pluto in the fourth house. So we need to talk about this. So the Mars, Saturn, and Pluto all in Libra in the fourth house, which again speaks towards ancestor medicine because Venus is in the eighth, ruling the fourth house. Damn, dude, like seriously, we got some ancestors up in your chart for show. Faux show. Can't even tell you how important that is to respect your elders, set up an altar, really work with that ancestral energy because you've got it so potently in your chart with that Pluto there. The issue though is that the family dynamic is very rough. The family dynamic is very hot, cold, hot, cold. Both Saturn and Mars are retrograde in the fourth. That's a very sticky placement to have in that fourth house of family. Hyperaggression and hyper restriction as well, because that kind of really aggressive expansiveness of Mars, but then that really tight restriction of Saturn. Saturn does win the day because it is in the sign of its exaltation. Mars is weak in Libra, in the sign of its fall. So we've got this opposing, contradicting family dynamic that's just really toxic until, again, you hit about 50, that Pluto matures, and you really start to understand, oh, that's why, and I think that working with those ancestor energies is really what will help remediate some of that fourth house stuff, because you've got Venus ruling that fourth house. There is a nectar that can be pulled out of that. There is a sweetness, there is a joy, a loveliness that can be extracted from that experience. You can bleed the stone that is your Saturn in Libra in the fourth, if you work with those energies constructively. Mars in Libra in the fourth is also, dude, your chart is all about family. I cannot take it. I cannot take how important the ancestors are for you. So just the idea that Mars in Libra is ruling the sun in Aries in the 10th, the house of success. The sun is in its exaltation in Aries, which is just beautiful. It does add a fiery kick to your personality, which contradicts that loving Cancer ascendant, and that moon in Aquarius in the 8th. So we've got that fire and air combo that when playing well together can actually be very explosive and very sparky if you let your mouth run without that filter of Cancer to hold it back. That's a beautiful placement. I love that. That's so fun. Yeah, so 10th in Aries, really great for the sun to be there, but ruled by that Mars in Libra. So when it comes to your legacy, when it comes to your long-term career endeavors, I really think that respecting the family dynamic, maybe going into the family business, but again, because that 8th house moon is there, working with the ancestors and working with healing that karma, tying in the family baggage in a way that is constructive, that makes you famous, that allows you to create space for that, healing in a way that is commanding, that is taking charge, that takes that Mars in Libra retrograde in the 4th, which is one of the worst positions it can be in, honestly, and transmutes it into that sun in Aries in the 10th, which is literally one of the best places that you could put your sun. And I think that that's really the crux of your chart, is to take that afflicted Mars and to turn it into that sun in the 10th and really become that pillar of the community that you never really had. Beautiful. Good stuff. Thank you, Erin, for submitting your chart, and I appreciate you following and liking all my stuff. Hey, Sandy. Hey, Beth. Hey, Richard. Scorpio. Love you. Yeah, so if you would like to be on the live streams, feel free to shoot your birth deets to me. Send in your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I do need that exact birth time, and I need you to spell out the month and day so that I get your chart details correct. And that will be that will be that. And we will add you to the queue. We've got a queue that's about a couple days long, but I'm always accepting new charts. If you would also like to book a private consult with me, if you don't want your business all up on social media, then feel free to just visit ScorpioRisingAstrology.com and we will schedule that for you. Halfway through the chart dynamic, we're on number 4 with Samantha. Hi, Sam. How's it going? Great name. October 24th in Grayling, born at 10:47 a.m. Let's look at it. So we've got the ascendant at 0 degrees Sag, red flag. So not that 0 degrees Sag, there's nothing wrong with 0 degrees Sag ascendant. We just need to be very, very careful because the ascendant is the fastest moving place in a chart. So when somebody comes to me with a 0 degree ascendant, if that birth time is not absolutely exact within 5 minutes of either side, that could potentially shift the ascendant and shift the entire chart. So we need to be absolutely sure about all of this, because 5 minutes in either direction, you've got a Scorpio ascendant and you've got that sun at 0 degrees Scorpio, that Mars at 5 degrees Scorpio, Mercury and Pluto all in Scorpio, but yours is in the 12th house. So we've got a very interesting chart dynamic, but if that ascendant was shifted because the birth time was incorrect, we might have a totally different chart. However, Samantha, we have some fun things to talk about before we get into the Scorpio nastiness in your 12th. I say nasty with affection, by the way. The ascendant at 0 degrees is being ruled by your Jupiter in Virgo in the 10th. We've also got Venus in Virgo in the 10th, and the MC in the 10th, all in Virgo. So part of the career mission, especially because work is so important to you with that moon in Taurus in the 6th, is to put things in order, is to take things that are big, grandiose, have zero boundaries, and to organize them and put them into all little boxes. Jupiter and Venus, both benefics, tend to be rather all-encompassing. They tend to be, especially Jupiter tends to be big, bold, brash. Venus tends to be lovely with her curves, but her cup runneth over. Yeah. And Virgo, having both of those signs both of those planets that are known for abundance in the restrictive, confining earth sign of Virgo, which is able to take those resources and make sure that none of the pieces fall out. I think that one of your career functions, one of the best things that you succeed in within your work dynamic, and certainly what you'll be known for if you're not known for it already, is managing those resources for other people who get out of control. So taking those really, I want to say inflammatory, but it's not necessarily inflammatory because we're dealing with Venus and Jupiter. Those overly expansive resources, that attention that's going in a million directions. Your career goal is to actually take all of that attention and to focus it in a way that's manageable, as opposed to letting people have their run of the town. That's a skill that you're exceedingly good at. But that is a very interesting dynamic because it pulls us back into that Mercury and Scorpio in the 12th house, ruling that 10th house chart. Yeah, so I'm not necessarily a fan of seeing Scorpio in the 12th house because Scorpio is already hidden. Yeah, Scorpio is already underneath the surface. Scorpio already enjoys being in the underbelly, but putting it in the 12th house, which is one of the most hidden houses in the chart. It is the house of hidden enemies. It is the house of hospitalizations, where people literally get put away to die or pass. There's a lot of stuff happening in the 12th house that is naturally hidden, and Scorpio just compounds that because we do have the sun here. We have self-esteem issues. We have the sun being suppressed, its light being submerged. That Mars, that will, that sense of action, that drive, that passion, although it is in Scorpio, it is also suppressed in the 12th or hidden in the 12th. And Mercury, that planet of communication, which would naturally bring the mind to sharpness. It is very sharp in Scorpio, but again, it is hidden in the 12th. We also have Pluto in the 12th, which brings tons of untapped potential for you, Samantha. I think that's something that you'll really only recognize halfway through the life because you've got that Pluto in the 12th. One of the things that you'll really start to appreciate as you get older is how strong you actually are as a person. But because your moon is in the 6th in Taurus, that house of work, health, pets, and it's directly opposing all of that stuff in the 12th, we do have this sense that you are able to crawl out of that cave in order to get things done. And that's really, if you're struggling with motivation, if you're struggling with all of this suppression that we find in the 12th, we really just need to be aware that work is one of the ways that you can pull yourself out of it. Staying busy, staying productive. The carrot that you would dangle in front of yourself is a grandiose problem that could be solved by nobody else but you. And that's one of the ways to trigger that moon, trigger those benefic planets in the 10th house, and really pull yourself out of that kind of self-defeating, victimized spiral that the 12th tends to kind of toilet bowl us around with when we find planets in that space. We do have the North Node. We do have the North Node in the 2nd, ruled by Saturn and Aquarius in the 3rd. That's fun. Saturn and Aquarius squaring the Sun at 0 degrees. Sun is at 0 degrees. Saturn's at 0 degrees. Sun is separating. That's a really interesting placement, Samantha. I'm a fan of that. Because Saturn is in the sign that it naturally rules, it likes to be in Aquarius. It's ruling that 2nd house of finance. One of the ways that you actually might make money is through writing, speaking, teaching, because those 2 houses are connected. I think that if you were to put that moon in that Virgo 10th house to work, you might be really, really good at writing policy and procedure manuals for big companies would be a good way to think about it. You might also use your ability to speak to make money as a speaker, a presenter who's able to kind of corral the masses, as it were, that hypnotic voice that really allows you to say, hey, look, chaos, I understand that you're having a great time, but we actually need to bring it back in, to reel it back in. And that's something that you're uniquely very good at. But I think the monetary component is something that you're definitely going to be working towards in this life in terms of mastering. We do have Uranus here, we do have Neptune here. Both outer planets make the 2nd house of finance very unpredictable. But part of the way that you access sustainable finance is by leveraging your skills in a writing, teaching, speaking way, even though that conflicts with all of that 12th house hiddenness about you being more vocal about what you've learned along the way. I think that's one of the ways that you remediate your chart personally. Cool. So that's Samantha. Thank you everybody for jumping in. I appreciate it. Yes, send your birth info to me via private message. I need your birth date, place, and time. Yes, if you've already had a private reading with me, you can totally get back in the queue. Thank you for asking, Sandy. Likewise, if you have not had a private reading with me, you can always schedule that. Just shoot me an email, Sam@Scorpio Rising Astrology. Hit me up on Instagram, Facebook. My stuff also goes to Twitter as well. And we will get you in the queue some way, shape, or form, and we will continue this until we run out of names. So yeah, that's fun. I also have classes if you'd like to learn astrology via the website. Okay. Let's break it down for April. April was born 5:53 a.m. in Cedro Woolley. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Another Sag ascendant. That's fun. Sag ascendant, this time being ruled by Jupiter in Libra in the 11th. Fun placement. Venus in Pisces in the 4th, ruling the 6th. Mercury in Aquarius in the 3rd, ruling the 10th. You've got a lot of really interesting placements, April, and one of the things that I enjoy about your chart right off the bat is how diverse it is. Because we've got a really strong personality with that Jupiter ruling the ascendant in the 11th house of friends. Very good with people. Yeah. We've got that moon in Aquarius and that Mercury in Aquarius giving sharpness to your mind, giving a little bit of social distancing emotionally, because the moon is still new. Your sun is in Capricorn in the 2nd, while your moon is in Aquarius in the third. So the emotions are hidden, but you're very good with people. And then we've got that Scorpio Mars in the 12th again, 12th house themes ruling that fifth house of creativity, children, and sexuality. With Saturn here in Aries, there's a lot of really cool dynamics in your chart. I think that's really an interesting part of your situation is you're good at a lot of stuff. You've got a lot of stuff that you've just learned how to master. One, I think because of that Mercury and Aquarius and that Aquarius moon, you just know how things are electrically transmitted through that vibration. Like you can walk into a situation, assess that situation, and really just get it and get straight to work. But I think one of the untapped talents that you might find about your personal chart is that ascendant in Sagittarius being ruled by Jupiter in the 11th. Whenever I see Jupiter in Libra, because Jupiter and Libra are both associated with law, as well as Saturn, which is very present in your chart, the idea that you might find good potential in the legal field, being a lawyer or working with law. But Jupiter in the house of friendships is a really great placement, especially in Libra. You'd also find great work in the counseling industry because, again, you just get people. Jupiter is the luckiest planet in our chart. So the fact that you have that in your house of friendships is a great sign of socialization. We do have Uranus in Libra here, as well as the South Node and the MC. So when it comes to friendships, that's a really important part of your chart. It's something that you've already learned to master. It's not something that you need to really work on. It just kind of comes effortlessly to you. But one thing that we need to understand about wherever Uranus is placed is it brings unpredictability, it brings slight cataclysm, it brings friends into the picture who have a very Uranian flavor, who are slightly chaotic, very groundbreaking genius, but also very disruptive movers and shakers. So that's a really interesting part of your chart, I think. Because that Jupiter in Libra is ruling that fourth house of family, family being very well connected is a really possible part of your chart, because we also have Venus in Pisces here. Venus in Pisces is in the sign of its exaltation. Wherever a Venus in Pisces is, there's just that overabundance of love and affection, and that's in your house of family. So we find that family life specifically being very, very lovely because Venus is present, but Venus is ruling that house of friendships as well. So family, friends, giving you a little bit of extra luck, or you working a lot with family friends from a social justice cause perspective, and really finding connection with those people that were introduced to you by your family. Your blood tribe then bleeds into your chosen tribe, as it were. The moon in the third house is just really fun for the moon in the third house is really interesting for just writing, teaching, communicating in general, because Mercury is here as well. You're very good with words, something that I think you can use to your advantage in your career. Writing up contracts, something that you could do very easily because the moon is also ruling that 8th house of taxes, accounting, business. I think that would be a really fun use of your talents. Working in the counseling field, working in like business remediation as well. So like business law would be a good way to express the Jupiter in Libra, but also the third house, 8th house connection. I think that would be super fun. Yeah, lots of good stuff. I really enjoy your chart, April, because there's so much we could delve into, so many different facets of you that exist. It can be hard to master all of those facets, but there are some themes. So if we keep coming back to that idea of friendships being really important, recharging around your social groups, and understanding how much love is just constantly stocked in your family space, I think that's another beautiful area of your chart that you can receive a lot of good energy from. Thank you, everybody who's commenting and sharing. I've got my charts for today, so I will put everybody in queue. If you send that birth information to me, I need your birth date, place, and time. Yes, exact time and place. And we are 40 minutes in. We've got 3 more charts to go, so I'm a little bit behind. Let's move on to Sarah. Sarah was born in at 7:45 p.m. in Nashua. Let's look at Sarah's chart. So we've got a Leo ascendant with the sun and Sag in the 5th. That's fun. I like that. Very fiery combo, especially with the moon at 27 degrees in Leo in the 1st house. Very emotional, Sarah, right off the bat. And the emotions don't tend to be small. They tend to be rather big. Leo makes things big, especially with the sun ruling your 1st house. But we've also got this really creative fire spark in your chart. Because that sun is in Sagittarius, a fire sign, in that 5th house of creativity, and it's in a sign-based trine to the moon. I think we've got a lot of really good potential for you to have massive amounts of artistic expression. Things that really help you to discharge some of that emotional heat by just sitting down to that artistic medium and letting all of your feelings flow into the clay, the page, the paper, the paint, whatever medium you choose, but just using creativity as an outlet for a lot of your emotional pressure, I think is going to be something, if you haven't discovered that already, that will really, really help you. We've got, interesting. We've got connections between the 7th house and the 3rd house, people. We've got Venus in Aquarius being ruled by Saturn in Libra, which is a mutual reception, points for Sarah. So whenever 2 planets swap signs, it means that those 2 houses are even more connected than they should be in somebody's house. Dynamic in their natal chart. Especially, this is lovely. Why? Because Jupiter is in its exaltation in Libra and it's being ruled by Venus in Aquarius, Saturn sign. So when we look at the 7th house of relationships and that 3rd house of writing, teaching, and communication, those are connected. So writing about love, teaching about love, but also having a partner who is in the writing, teaching, communication space. That's something you've always been attracted to, the writers, the poets, Sarah. Anybody who can use their words eloquently, especially those who are older, more mature, have a wiser sense of the world, have a wiser sense of experience, who are potentially touched or brushed by trauma. You've been always been attracted to that type. Slightly damaged, but very intelligent, because we look at that 7th house, 3rd house connection. Any way that relationships can be tied to teaching, speaking, writing, those 2 houses being so connected via chart, via sign exchange, and Saturn being in its exaltation, really, really great. Just for you personally, when it comes to that 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication, also siblings. Not necessarily ideal. We've got some friction here. Although Saturn's in its exaltation, it's not a great space for Saturn to be. And it's also, we've got Mars in Libra here, which is in the sign of its fall, which is also not a great place for it to be. So writing might actually come across, writing, teaching, speaking, one of the things that might hurt you in the beginning of your life is being unable to use your words, talking a little bit too aggressively or not talking at all, especially with that Leo ascendant. Your words might be brash, your words might be bold and beautiful, but they are not received well in the first part of the life, especially before 30, because I think that Leo gets the best of you, and we really start to see a lot of that untempered fire come through in the creative house via writing, and it really just doesn't let you shut up about things that you really should shut up about until you know better. But as your chart progresses and as these planets mature, you do get to know better, and you do get to unlock those skills. And I think that those skills in your chart, especially in the third, after you hit 50, when Pluto really starts to mature, you're going to find that writing, teaching, speaking is right up your alley, especially if you do it with your partner, or you establish that long-term relationship in that writing dynamic. I think you might also be either do the writing yourself, do it with a partner, or be the muse for somebody else's writing. So that's fun. Let's look at fifth house stellium. So we've got Uranus, we've got Uranus, Sun, Neptune, and Mercury all in Sagittarius in that fifth house of creativity, also sexuality and children. Although Sagittarius is technically considered a little bit more of a barren sign because it is a fire sign and it is mutable or unpredictable, because the fifth house is ruled by Jupiter in Scorpio in the fourth house of family. It wouldn't surprise me if you come from a big family or have created a big family of your own. We've got just a lot of heat here in that house of children, creativity, sexuality. Because everything is in Sagittarius, we need to be aware that blood pressure might be an issue. From a medical perspective, we need to be aware that liver toxicity might be an issue, because Neptune and Uranus are here, bringing a little bit of unpredictability. We need to be aware that the hips also might be a little bit finicky because Mercury is here. Wherever Mercury is placed, in the sign that it's placed, that body system tends to be our trick system. It tends to be a system that's always popping in and out of place, hyper-performing, underperforming, never really doing what it's told, as Mercury is the trickster. And medically, that tends to manifest as a body system that is out of control. And so we have the liver, the blood vessels, the hips associated with Sagittarius being that body system for Sarah. Jupiter and Scorpio in the fourth is a really interesting family placement to have, because Jupiter is that lucky placement, but Scorpio is that sign that pulls things deep underground. So in an extreme situation, wouldn't surprise me if your family were doomsday preppers, because Scorpio is constantly paranoid, and Jupiter would open up that paranoia and bring it really out into the open as a lower expression of that placement. As a higher expression of that placement, you might have a very big family that is very suspicious of one another. People who are naturally hypersensitive develop this sense of peaking paranoia, where it's like, even though they're in a room of their kin, they are still in that game of Clue in their own heads, thinking who done it, what did they do it with, and why did they do it. So that's a really interesting family placement that you've chosen to put in your chart. And I think that's pretty much it. We've got a good dynamic between the first and fifth house with creativity, third and seventh with relationships and writing, teaching, speaking, fun family and fun children. Yeah, good stuff. Lovely. Lovely, lovely. We've got 13 minutes left and 2 charts to do it. Let's see if we can divide it down the middle, giving me each about 6.5 minutes. And we're on to Brandon. Brandon was born at 6:05 in Glendale. Welcome to the show, Brandon. Let's go ahead and look at, fun. We've got a triple Gemini. We haven't had a triple sign, I think, on the Astro-Babble before. So yay, Brandon's the first triple Gemini. Woohoo! So we've got the moon in Gemini, we've got the sun in Gemini, and the sun is conjoining the ascendant in Gemini, all in Gemini. So let's talk about Gemini for 2 seconds, shall we? Gemini gets a bad rap as being the bipolar sign, and I disagree with that, but I agree with that for a couple reasons. Gemini is a bipolar sign because it can go from one end of the extreme to the other in a very short period of time. For you, that's emotionally, that's mentally, that's ego-wise, all in that framework, because Gemini is so heavily innervated in your chart. However, that also makes you very useful, makes you very creative, makes you very mentally quick, makes you very interesting, great at parties. But when we look at Gemini on the ascendant, that does bring some concern with being a little bit too hyperactive, being a little bit too flitty, being a little bit too unpredictable for those around you. So if you find people who are able to counterbalance and ground you without smothering you, that's going to be one of your life goals that I have a lot of. I have a lot of strong Gemini placement clients, and that's one of the things that they always express, that when they find a friend or when they find a family member who can really tolerate all of that Gemini, not tolerate in a judgy way, but really understand the whirlwind that is your internal experience, we find that those are the people that we need to keep around to not just keep us grounded when we need to be grounded from a Gemini perspective, but also people who just really kind of get it. Because people will look at that triple Gemini energy and they'll be like, no, that's too unpredictable for me. That's too unknown for me. I never know where they're going. I never know what they're thinking or what they're doing. And the minute that they change direction in the middle of the conversation, I get lost and I feel like they're not listening. And I think that that's the Gemini is actually the opposite. They're constantly listening, always vigilant, very much like Scorpio in that way. But that air sign really gives them the quickness that Scorpio does not have. So cool stuff, Brandon. Lots of great stuff. Yeah, I would highly suggest when clients come to see me and they're like, well, you say my sun's in this sign, my ascendant's in this sign, my moon is in this sign. Well, what horoscope should I read in the morning? And I always say, go with your ascendant. Yeah. First and foremost, then go with your sun. And if you're feeling emotional, go with your moon. Why not read all three? For you, Brandon, you're Gemini through and through. There is no separation. We just need to delve into the nuances of what kind of Gemini you are. And we see what kind of Gemini you are by looking to the ruler of your chart, the ruler of all three major personality signifiers, being Mercury. Your Mercury is at 18 degrees of Taurus in the 8th house, in the 12th house rather, because Taurus comes before Gemini. So that Mercury in Taurus in the 12th gives us a little bit of an issue. Again, the ruler of the ascendant being in the 12th does talk to us about self-consciousness. It does talk to us about the personality being compromised or hidden away in some way, shape, or form. Self-shame, potentially to talk yourself into that hidden enemy space. You are your own worst enemy is a good way that I like to talk to my clients who have that 12th house influence in their chart. You also have Saturn in Taurus here, which is not necessarily ideal to have so close to the ruler of your chart in the 12th house of hidden enemies. So we've got this overbearing sense of responsibility that you tend to take on. And it's not that you're not quick enough to do it. Speed is not the issue, Brandon. You can do it. Yeah. It's whether or not you're going to kill yourself in the process, because you have the mental acuity, you have the skill set, you have the adaptability to learn it, do it yourself. But whether or not you're going to get out of that unscathed and whether or not it's something that you actually need to be focusing on is really important to understand, because you're constantly trying to prove yourself to others. Because of that detriment in the 12th house, we have an issue with the Gemini where the Gemini comes forward and says, sure, I can do it. Why not? But all you're looking for is self-love. And unfortunately, you can't perform quick enough, fast enough, efficient enough to gain self-love from other people. And that's a really difficult place for the Gemini to really look in the mirror and to say, of all of the things that I could be, I'm going to love myself. Ooh, shivers when I say that. Let's go ahead and take a moment to just appreciate that fun stuff. Gemini coming through super strong this morning. So yeah, anybody with super Gemini in their chart, that's one of the issues that I see a lot of, and something that will constantly need to be worked on throughout the life. Because Mercury and Saturn are both in Taurus, we need to be very aware of the thyroid. The thyroid being ruled by Taurus, also the neck and the ligaments, the connective tissue of the body that make up our foundation. Having Mercury here, which makes them hypermobile, having Saturn here, which makes them dry, crinkly, and restrictive for the first 30 years of life, ruling the ascendant via the Mercury as well. There's body issues when it comes to metabolism. There's body issues when it comes to connective tissue and the neck. We just need to be aware that that's a point of remediation in Brandon's chart that needs to be tackled a little bit more productively. Uh, One of the reasons why metabolism might be an issue is because we've got hot cold going on in the stomach. We've got Mars in Cancer and Venus in Cancer, both in the second house. So just from an energetic perspective, and this is something that I go into in the planets course on my website, each planet has an energetic. Yeah, Mars is hot, Venus is cold, right? So having a hot planet and a cold planet in the sign of the stomach, it's kind of like no matter what Brandon chooses to eats. No matter what Brandon chooses to eat, the stomach gets disrupted. Yeah. So that's something that we just need to be aware of, is the digestive system is a little bit temperamental in Brandon's chart, which is, I think, why the metabolism gets so iffy. And if we work with Brandon to get some carminatives into the diet, whether working with nutritional yeast, chamomile, peppermint, ginger, any of the herbs that are known to help settle the stomach, but also stimulate breakdown in the body's tissues, depending on if the stomach feels cold, swollen, bloated, or hot, acidic, spasmodic. Choosing those herbal remedies accordingly is going to be really important. And that's some really deep stuff. I have a course on herbal energetics as well. There's lots of really interesting stuff. Let's see, what else do we have to say about Brandon's chart? Where's Virgo? Virgo's in family. So when we look at the 12th house of hidden enemies, having Mercury present, but Mercury also ruling the 4th house of family, there are hidden enemies in the family dynamic. It's a placement that I see in people's charts where there's a heavy distrust of the family situation. Also, because we have South Node here and we have Pluto here, the full extent of that distrust might not be realized until halfway through the life. But because that 4th house is connected to that 12th house, family going into the hospital, family needing to do a lot of their own transformation and karmic healing, but not necessarily doing it, and instead choosing to pick on other people. But just that idea that the hidden enemies are connected to family, and there might be some infighting in that dynamic with Brandon's chart. Where's Jupiter? Jupiter's fun. So Jupiter in Libra, retrograde, but still in Libra, in the 5th house, ruling that 10th house of career success. That's a fun placement to have, Jupiter ruling the 10th house of career. One of the things that Brendan might actually do for a long-term career or be very good at down the road is working with children, working with artists, or working with other people's parents, because the 5th house is that house of parenting. Going into childcare, something that he's naturally good at, especially with Mars in Cancer, ruling that 6th house of work. Mars in Cancer is a really interesting placement because Mars doesn't like to be in Cancer, because it's opposing the natural Aries that Mars loves. But I find that Mars in Cancer people have this soft aggression, much more of that mama bear energy than other people. And the fact that you have that ruling your 6th house, again, you do very well in childcare. So yeah, that's a little bit about Brandon's chart. Just getting everything rolling. Oh, we've only got a couple minutes, so Instagram is going to die. We're going to have to take up on Facebook. Moses, if you'd like to be added, just send me birth date, place, time via Messenger. I'm not doing this about the current cast that I do on Instagram, Facebook. This is reading other people's charts. So it doesn't have anything to really do with my daily forecast posts that I'm doing. Follow me on Facebook. Just search my name, Sam Bellier. Sam Bellier, Belyea is my last name on Facebook for those of you on Instagram. And it should pop right up because I'm going live on both platforms. Okay, last chart. Regine. Regine was born 1:35 a.m. in Cincinnati. Let's go ahead and look to Regine's chart. All these fire ascendants. We started with a couple Scorpios. Now we're into the fire ascendants. So Sag ascendant being ruled by Jupiter and Pisces in the 4th. Combust the sun. Mm. Mm-mm-mm. Sun combustion, not ideal for Jupiter. Jupiter is in the sign of its rulership, being Pisces, which is great. We also have Mercury in Pisces here, which is in the sign of its detriment, opposing its natural exaltation in Virgo. So family dynamic is pretty complicated, Regine. We've gotten a couple charts with family dynamic issues. Yours is certainly one of them because you overly identify with family with the ruler of your chart being in that fourth house of family. I think family is very important to you. It's something that you find not necessarily comforting, but something that you just feel naturally kin to. We don't necessarily find comfort here because although the sun is giving us an ego boost here, we do have that Mercury in Pisces energy. So there is this trickster energy in the fourth house. There is miscommunication in the fourth house. Even though your family is dysfunctional, you love them anyway because you feel like you have to love them because that's who you are. Very kind and loving Piscean energy, especially when we see Jupiter in Pisces in the fourth. You're a family girl. You know, it's just something that you do very well, is just wrapping people up in those loving Piscean arms and being a second mama to those who you deem worthy of that love. So yeah, that's a fun identification principle. Whenever we see the first and the fourth house connected by rulership, sun is there. Oh, that's fun too, Regine. We've got the moon in Libra being ruled by Venus in Aquarius, which is also being ruled by Saturn in Aquarius in the third. So we've got a really sharp third house being connected to the moon in the 11th. Naturally, having friends who are in the writing space, teaching space, speaking space, you socially surrounding yourself with those people, identifying with that as your tribe. Because your moon is in Libra in the 11th, you tend to have a natural friendship dynamic, which I envy. You tend to walk into a room and everybody's your friend, and I think that's a lovely thing paired with all of your fourth house stuff. Is you just make people feel at home, Regine. You just have that talent, and I think you should be aware of that if you're not aware of that already. But back to that connection between the 11th house and the third house of speaking, writing, teaching, because we've got Saturn here in Aquarius, a sign that it rules, and we've got Venus in Aquarius connecting to the 11th. I think that, again, a lot of your friends are in the writing, teaching, speaking space, but you yourself might actually be a really good writer, speaker, teacher. It might not necessarily go anywhere because we've got... Well, no. I mean, you could sell some of your stuff and make a little bit of cash from it. But you've already done that. Like, you've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. It's not something that, oh, well, no, because Venus is, I retract that statement. This is live. I'm able to retract statements. Yeah, I didn't see that. We've also got Venus ruling the 6th house of work, Saturn ruling that 2nd house of finance. Okay. I can see writing, teaching, speaking as a profession. I can definitely see that. What you're going to be known for, though, is actually going to be the family dynamic and making people feel safe amidst their chaos. I think if you use your writing in a way that perpetuates that message and allows that kind of hyper mom energy to come forward, that's really going to be what brings you into a space of ease. If you were to write children's books, I think that would be an interesting use of your skill. But all of your writing, teaching, communicating should pull you back into that idea of making others feel safe when they are not. Yeah, as opposed to writing like murder mystery or a time period piece in the wild, wild west. Like your compassion and your desire to make people feel as if the world makes sense and to spiritually connect them to something higher than themselves. I think that that's something that has to translate through your writing. Otherwise, the writing will not be successful. When I say writing, speaking, teaching, it could be any blend of those. We've got that sun in the fourth being ruled by Mars, or ruling that Mars in Leo retrograde in the ninth. That's tricky, because in addition to the tricky Mercury in Pisces, we've also got a connection between the travel foreigner and higher education space in the fourth house of family. Wouldn't surprise me if your family was in the higher education space, like mom or dad were college professors or taught, spoke, wrote in some way, shape, or form, but specifically that one of your parents was foreign to you, one or both of your parents was foreign. You could be adopted, but also just the idea that one of those parents might have a foreign culture that they brought into the family home, which might have even been connected to their teaching if they went overseas. Yeah, so that's fun. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about Regine's chart before we wrap up for the day? Yeah, so we've got the moon in Libra in the 11th, making the ruler of the 8th. North Node is also in the 8th. I think if I were to summarize your chart, Regine, there's an interesting dynamic that's kind of forming the more I look at it. And it's you taking all of this compassionate energy, all your writing, teaching, speaking skills on helping people move on, because that moon in Libra is ruling the 8th house of death. You could be an excellent end of life counselor. You could use your writing in a spiritual way to help people who might not understand the true meaning of life's end, work through that karma, that mental block, that emotional block. Because you've also had a brush with death. Whenever the moon is connected to the 8th, there's an idea of understanding death, especially because it's 11th house of friends. You might have even had friends who passed away at an early age. We find that the connection with the death, the dying, but also the estate planning process of that death. You have unique insight into that, which can be translated into your writing, and make people feel, again, that Pisces, that Jupiter Pisces ruling the ascendant in the fourth, really just wants to bring the home to the people who need it the most. And I think that's really the crux of your chart. And who needs it the most but somebody who's literally about to transition out of the physical experience. Cool. So that's that. Thank you. I've received all of your birth dates, places, and times. Thank you for tuning in one more time to the live Astro-Babble. If you have additional questions, comments, concerns, feel free to message me. Shoot me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I need that exact birth time, and I need you to spell out the month and day for those of you who are overseas, so I know what month and day we're talking about. If you would like to learn astrology or schedule a consult, you can always go to ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, and follow my daily posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter for those as well. And in the meantime, we will log off, and I get to say my favorite phrase: may the stars be ever in your favor.